You're out back behind the house, maybe pulling weeds or checking where the porch is starting to sag. The ground is dry there, but something catches your eye, just under the edge of a stone. It's a nail. It's old, iron, curled at the tip like it's been there a long time. And it's wrapped in this red thread. You notice the head is flattened, just enough to catch the edge of a name scratched in by hand. You didn't drop it there, and it sure wasn't left behind on accident. Someone put it there on purpose, and not for luck. Down south, it's not unusual to find iron like that buried where people pass. They're driven into door frames and tucked into cracks in the foundation. They're hammered into trees. Sometimes it's a nail, sometimes a knife. Once in a while, it's a spike the size of your forearm, rusted all the way through. Most folks never see them, or if they do, they don't know what they're looking at. But you do. In folk magic, sharp things carry weight. They mark a boundary. They hold a grudge. They send a message. Knives cut cords that need cutting. Nails anchor energy in place, or pin something down so it can't follow you home. And if either one is wrapped, rusted, or buried somewhere it's not supposed to be, you leave it alone. Because sharp magic doesn't just protect. It doesn't just banish. It remembers. I'm Papa G, and this is the Feral Folklorist, and today we're talking about blades and iron, how knives and nails have been used to bless, bind, cut loose, or hold things still. From back porch crossings to the swords and tarot, we're walking the line between protection and danger. So before you pick up that rusted nail or dig up that blade someone left in the dirt, make sure you know what it was for. There's never been anything neutral about a blade, not in magic, not in folklore, and definitely not in the kind of work that shows up nailed into someone's fence post or slid into the dirt behind a crawl space. Sharp tools carry intent, and across time and culture, they've been used to do one of two things: protect someone or cut it loose. Let's start with a knife. In ceremonial magic, there's a ritual blade called an athame, double-edged, usually not meant for physical cutting. It is used to cast circles, direct energy, that sort of thing. But that's not what we're talking about here. In folk magic, the knife is a working tool. It's not for show, it's not for ritual, it's for doing. In Southern conjure, a black-handled knife is often used to uncross someone, to scrape off cross conditions or cut ties or break bindings. It's also used to mark boundaries, literally and spiritually. If someone wanted to keep a spirit from entering the house, they might drive a knife into the doorframe, blade down. Some would bury it under the front step. Others wrapped theirs in red cloth and left it in a wall. In Appalachian practice, you'd sometimes find a knife placed under the bed to protect against witch riding, where someone believed they were being spiritually attacked in their sleep. And if you were having a string of bad dreams, or getting the feeling someone was watching you while you slept, you put a blade under the pillow, handle towards the head, edge pointing out. There's also a practice where a knife is dragged through the air just above a person's skin, head to toe, to clear off anything that's lingering. It's not to cut the person, but to cut what's clinging to them. None of this is decorative, it's practical, and these tools carry memory. A knife used to cut energy doesn't forget what it was used for. That's why in most traditions, you never use your working blade for anything else. No cooking, no opening packages. Once it's charged, it stays sacred. Then there's iron. Iron is one of the oldest protective metals we've got. Long before it was easy to come by, people treated it like spiritual armor. In the British Isles, folks nailed iron into door frames to keep witches out. Horseshoes were hung over thresholds, open side up to catch luck, or open side down to pour protection over whomever walked beneath it. In African spiritual systems, iron is sacred to Ogun, spirit of war, fire, and metal. When those beliefs crossed the water during the transatlantic slave trade, they didn't get left behind. In hoodoo and other African American traditions, iron kept its weight, nails especially. You'll find iron nails used in all kinds of jar work. Some are protection spells, rusty nails dropped in a jar with red thread, black salt, and a person's name to block harm. Some are cursing jars filled with vinegar and pins, hot peppers, and nails to sour someone's life. Either way, the nail isn't just filler. It grounds the spell. It holds the work in place. Old coffin nails, real ones, pulled from a burial or picked up at a graveyard, are used for baneful work. That's not beginner level material, though. You're working with the line between life and death, and if you don't know how to handle that kind of charge, you're asking for it to follow you home. Railroad spikes are another one. Big iron, usually found near old tracks. They're used to pin down property lines, set magical boundaries, or seal off corners of graveyards and ritual sites. Some folks bury one at each corner of the yard to keep intruders out, physical or otherwise. And it's not just a southern thing. In Slavic traditions, iron was laid near a newborn to keep spirits from stealing the child. In Scotland, a knife was kept near the cradle to keep fairies away. And in Haitian voodoo, iron tools are still used to represent strength and protection, especially when working with warrior spirits. There's also a long history of cutting for spiritual transition. In some African diasporic traditions, knives are used in rituals to cut spiritual ties, to end relationships, to break hexes, or separate someone from a condition that's stuck to them. You might see a red cord tied to a person's wrist or ankle, cut with a single blade stroke as part of the working. It's clean, it's fast, and it marks a clear ending. Even in birth rituals, there's cutting that carries meaning. In parts of Italy and the American South, midwives would carry a knife to sever the cord and symbolically cut the child free from spiritual danger. Some place the knife under the bed or on the threshold during delivery, not to be used but to hold space. And in some Italian traditions, the knife is placed under the bed to cut the pain. And just like a blade can cut, a nail can bind. You see this in foot track magic, where someone hammers a nail through a person's footprint or through a name written on paper. That act holds the person still. It slows their luck. It weighs them down. Nails driven into trees are another one. If someone believed a tree was haunted, they'd drive an iron nail into the trunk to trap the spirit inside. And in some places, this custom is still done. So these tools aren't ornamental. They're not about aesthetics. They were chosen because they worked. And they're still being found today under floorboards, inside walls, out near fence posts that haven't been painted in nearly 60 years. You pull up a nail with a thread around it or a blade wrapped in cloth, that's not just some homeowner being weird. That was a spell left behind, and you just disturbed it. If it was yours, you'd know what it was for. And if it wasn't, you better learn quick what to do with it next. There's no middle ground with a sharp object, not in magic. If you're using a knife or a nail in a working, it's either there to sever something or to hold something in place. That's the whole job. No guessing, no symbolism, just intent and follow through. So let's start with a knife. A ritual blade in folk practice doesn't need to be fancy. Some folks use a black-handled knife. Some use the same pocket knife their grandfather carried. Doesn't matter, so long as it's cleaned, charged, and kept for magic only. If you used it to gut fish or open mail, it's no longer a working blade. That's not superstition, it's just energetic clutter. In root work and southern conjure, one of the clearest uses of the blade is cord cutting. That's when you cut emotional or spiritual ties between yourself and someone else. Could be an ex, a toxic family member, a former client, or a lingering spirit that hasn't let go. You'll see this done often with red thread, and we've talked about red thread through many episodes so far because it's so prevalent in magic. You light a candle, you speak the name of the person or the situation, and cut the cord clean through in one stroke. Then you bury the ends or burn them. That's how you signal this is over, the connection has been severed. This can also be done with scissors. So there's another sharp object. People use scissors often for cutting cords. I have a pair of copper-handled scissors that I only use for this purpose. And that type of magic is often called, when we're dealing with cord cutting, it's called a cut and clear spell. And it works because it's deliberate. You don't saw at the thread. You don't do it halfway. You cut once with full focus, and that's the magic. There's also a practice where the blade is often used to scrape off spiritual residue. Some call it sweeping or stroking, where the knife is held just above the skin and moved from head to toe without making contact. We discussed this in the beginning, but let's go further. It's not dangerous. It's not dramatic. It's a way of saying whatever is clinging to this person, we're cutting it loose now. And then there's the home protection side of things. A knife buried at the threshold, blade out, tells whatever's trying to sneak in that house that it isn't open to them. It's not about hurting someone. It's about drawing a spiritual line. Same thing with a blade placed under the bed. If someone's been having nightmares or if the house has felt off ever since a certain guest came through, that knife goes under the frame, edge facing out. Let the energy know it's being watched. Now let's move on to nails. Iron nails are used to pin things down. Not figuratively, not symbolically. They're used to fix energy in place. So you want someone to stay away? You write their name on a piece of paper, fold it away from you, and drive a nail through it. That paper can go into a jar, into the dirt, into a wall, whatever fits the working. That nail is what makes it stick. So you want to hold a boundary on your land, maybe? You walk the four corners and hammer a nail or a spike into each one. That's a physical declaration. This space is closed. What's mine stays mine. In graveyard work, you might see nails used to hold energy close to a site. You don't want something leaving the grave it came from, so you nail it down. That's the term, nail it down. And you don't just use any nail. You use one that's already carrying weight. It's rusted or blackened or pulled from somewhere old. In souring jars, nails keep the agitation going. Someone's crossing you, you're not looking to destroy them, but you want them to feel the grind. That's when you add vinegar and red pepper and iron, and you just let it stew. You let it rust, and you let them feel the sting of it. There's also movement binding. This shows up in Appalachian and Hoodoo traditions often. So you find a nail in someone's shoe, especially if it's been nailed through paper or thread. It's not bad luck, but it is a spell. It's meant to slow you down, to trip you up. to keep you from getting where you need to go. So this brings us to responsibility. If you pull up a nail or a spike or a knife that was placed for magical purposes and you don't know what it was doing, you've interrupted a working. Could have been a curse, could have been protection, could have been something buried generations ago to keep a restless spirit from crossing the fence line. If it's not yours and you don't have the training to read it clearly, it's best just not to mess with it. Or if you've already pulled it up, don't take it into your house. Wrap it in cloth, salt it, and bury it far away from where you sleep. If you can't bury it, drop it into moving water. But either way, seal the act, say something aloud, say a prayer, acknowledge the break. Do not pretend it was just old junk and walk away from it. You have to do something about it. Because sharp magic stays sharp. And if it was buried with intent, it will keep looking for something to finish the job. There's a saying in old conjure, don't pull up what you didn't bury. And you'd be surprised how often that gets ignored. People think they're just cleaning up junk or salvaging something neat to hang onto the wall. But when you pull an old knife out of a wall or dig up a nail wrapped in cloth near your steps, what you're really doing is interrupting a conversation, one you probably weren't invited to. So here's what it looks like in practice. In northern Georgia, a couple renovating a 1920s farmhouse found an iron knife hidden behind the brickwork near the fireplace. It was wrapped in what looked like flannel, tied with red thread and covered in this thick dust. And when they pulled it out, they tossed the cloth and stuck the knife on a shelf as decoration. Within a week, the dog refused to go near the hearth. Lights began flickering after the wiring was completely replaced and fixed, and both people started having the same dream about standing in a dirt field holding a tool that couldn't be put down. They reached out to a local root worker who told them flatly, you disturbed a boundary. That knife wasn't protection anymore. It was a live wire. They wrapped it in black cloth, salted it, and buried it under a cedar tree outside town. No issues after that. But they said the field from the dream showed up on a drive a few months later. It was a real place, the same real fence, just off a back road they had never traveled before. Another story is over in East Tennessee. A boy's shoe kept going missing. Same shoe, always the left one. His parents thought it was a prank until they found it outside, nailed to the porch rail with a bent iron spike. No one confessed to it, no signs of forced entry in the house. And what made it stranger was the name paper they found underneath, folded and tucked between the rail slats, handwritten in pencil, not the boy's name, but his mother's maiden name. That's a movement binding. It's a subtle one meant to cause fatigue or keep someone close to a place they were trying to leave. So they burned the paper, salted the porch, and moved the rail section to a burn pile, but they never figured out who left it. You'll also hear stories about knives left in crawl spaces, found under porches, sometimes wrapped, sometimes stuck straight into the dirt with no explanation. One from southern Mississippi involved a black-handled knife found in a hollow spot under the back stairs. The homeowner had been having constant conflict with her brother. Nothing huge, just this slow bitterness, something that kept picking at them. They found the knife when they were insulating the floor, and it was wrapped in hair. Now, hair is taglock magic. It is considered a personal concern, something that was actually attached to a person and strengthens a spell. Combine that with a blade, that's either a cutting or a holding. Either way, it's meant to act. So they reburied the knife, cut ties with the brother, and did a full home cleansing. Things eased up after that, but they said it felt like the house had been pressing on them, like it had been holding its breath for years and it finally let go. So these stories aren't built for drama. Nobody's getting dragged out of their bed by spirits. What you're hearing is pressure, spiritual weight, left to cook until someone finally stumbles across it. And it always happens the same way. You find something sharp where it shouldn't be. You feel the air shift, and then the house doesn't sit right until you do something about it. That's why we say don't touch what's buried unless you know what it was holding down. Because in folk magic, sharp tools are never neutral. They're placed with purpose. And they don't stop working just because the person who put them there is gone. So here's what you need to know about sharp magic. Knives cut, nails hold, and both are used to make a line. One that says what stays, what goes, and what never had permission in the first place. This kind of work isn't decorative and it's not aesthetic, it's practical. If you're using a blade or driving a nail in for magical purposes, you better be clear about what it's supposed to do, because once it's in the dirt and once it's been charged, it's not passive anymore. It is a spell. It is a working. So let's walk through two very solid ones, one for sealing down your space and the other one for cutting loose from something that won't let go. This first one we're going to call a 4-nail home boundary working. And the purpose is to reinforce the spiritual boundaries around your home or your workspace. So you'll need 4 iron nails or railroad spikes, a pinch of black salt or some crushed eggshell, a black candle, and a spoken intention, which we'll get to. So what do? You clean the nails with salt water or Florida water. Doesn't have to be too ceremonial. Just make sure you start off with clean tools. That's what we're doing. It's not really a cleansing, it's a cleaning. You're making sure you're starting with something that is clean and fresh. You walk to each corner of your property or the corners of your apartment, if that's what you've got, and in each corner drive a nail into the ground or the wall base and say something like, "This is my line. What's mine stays mine. What's not stays out." And you drop a pinch of black salt or the eggshell at the base of each nail. Light the black candle near your front step and let it burn undisturbed for at least 13 minutes. Most people often let it burn all the way down. Some people, after that 13 minutes, snuff it out. Others, like I said, let it go completely. And that's all it is. This working doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. You're just fixing a boundary. So once it's done, it should hold for most of the time about 3 months, and you recheck it after big storms or house guests or periods of conflict. Now, if you nail something into the baseboards, they're pretty much going to stay, but you want to check your actual property because outside things can shift a bit. And now we're moving on to a cord cutting working, and that's for spiritual separation. It's to release attachment to a person or a habit or a condition that's lingering past its welcome. And what you need is a knife, only used for magical work, a piece of red or black cord, a white candle, a slip of paper with a name or condition written 3 times. And what you do is you wrap the paper around the middle of the cord. You light the candle and say, "I release this tie. No harm, no hatred, just space." Use the knife to cut the cord in one clean stroke. Don't saw it and don't hesitate. Just one clean cut. Then you burn or bury the paper and both ends of the cord. Clean the knife in salt or moonlight before storing it away to use for your next magical practice. And this is often done during a waning moon or right after a full one. Don't repeat it unless it's absolutely needed. If it worked, you feel a shift. might be emotional, might be something in your sleep that tells you that it worked. Just notice it and move forward. Knives and nails don't care what you meant to do. They work based on what you actually did. So before you bury that blade or drive that nail or pull up something sharp that's been holding a corner down for the last 40 years, ask yourself what it was meant to do. And if you don't know, then leave it be. I'm Papa G, and you've been listening to the Feral Folklorist. Next time, we're heading back inside to talk about omens in the oven, the signs and warnings that show up when magic hides in plain sight, right between the flour jar and the fireplace. Until then, keep your magic sharp. If you'd like to hear the After the Show episode where I go deeper into the folklore, spill a little extra dirt, and sometimes rant just a bit, consider becoming a patron over on my Patreon at patreon.com/PapaG. You can find the official site for the podcast at feralfolklorist.com. And if you need spell supplies for any of the workings we talk about on the show, our metaphysical shop, Aromagees Botanica, has been weaving magic for over 25 years. That's over at aromagees.com. And finally, don't forget about our digital magazine, Folklorium, for articles, herbal profiles, spells, and a little bit of folkloric fiction at folklorium.com.